Chose Joy with Melanie, where we discuss all things love, wellness, and joy. I am your host, Melanie Foote-Davis, also known as the Self-Love Cultivator. Today I'm super excited about this episode. It's with my sister friend Esther Bailey-Bass, and her initials EBB is Ebb, and so quite often she drops a nugget and I jokingly say, we've just been ebbed. So that's what's about to happen on this episode. Esther supports women in the process of uncovering mysteries of themselves. She helps them shift from a passive mindset to one of a leader. She says the world needs women to have the audacity to be self-governed and to be the authority over their own lives. We've coddled each other and given excuses for why we cannot. We've always had permission to dream big. It's the stuff movies are made of, and yet we want someone else to create our lives for us. Women, as leaders in life, work, and business, it's time to move beyond good intentions and take action. Those are some of the words of Esther Bailey-Bass. So, without further ado, prepare to be ebbed. Well, hello there, Miss Esther Bailey-Bass.
Hello, Melanie.
Welcome to She Chose Joy.
Well, thank you. I'm glad to be here.
I am so excited about this conversation for many reasons. And I know my friend Mickey is probably going to tease me when she hears me say this because I already know that keeping this conversation to a 30 or 45-minute conversation is going to be a challenge for me because you and I, we always can go for so long. And my friend Mickey is going to tease me about that because we have this running joke about who actually is, well, I'm never short on words. Rarely am I short on words. And I use a lot of words to express myself, but so does she. But I don't think she's accepted it yet. So I'm saying all this so that she can talk about me later. Anyway. So one of the things that she's going to get a kick out of is knowing that she's not the only one that I stay on the phone with for long periods of time.
Mm-hmm.
Which means she's going to try to mean that means I talk more. So anyway, running joke. So welcome. I am super excited about this conversation. So thank you for agreeing to spend this time with us today.
I'm excited to be here. Thank you.
So this is, we were actually speaking earlier about several other things. And of course, we moved from topic to topic. And then we started really having a juicy conversation about, being how we show up in the world and the times when someone may think that, we're too big, you're being too much, you're not being enough, all of those different things. And then you said something that I felt needed to be recorded.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a world beyond the world we live in. There's the made up world, the internet world, the ethers and how we pull energy from words and make things real and all the things, all the stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And what you brought up, it kind of struck me. Like, I don't know what was meant by the comment that someone made to you. And, it's like, well, what did they mean by that? And through our conversation, we came to unapologetically authentic.
Mm-hmm.
And that's been something, that's out there. It's in the ethers. It's on the social channels. It's written in print. It's everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean in practicality, in reality,
Mm-hmm.
to be unapologetically authentic? And I believe what you're referring to was, for me, it's this thing about, okay, well, it's out there now. We need to really kind of pull that apart and massage it a little bit. And as we were talking, what came up for me, I usually get pictures, visuals in my mind.
Mm-hmm.
And what came up for me was um, something in nature. And it is, when we think about the safari and you have lions and you have elephants and zebra and giraffe all coexisting together,
Mm-hmm.
they understand themselves and they also understand their prey and their predators. And they
Mm-hmm.
understand the limitations and boundaries that are already set in nature. And it doesn't mean that a lion not be a lion or an elephant not be an elephant. It means that I am that I am unapologetically, and yet I understand that I'm not in the world alone.
Mm-hmm. Let's just pause right there. Do you all understand why I wanted her to say that where you could hear it? Because I could never say it in the way that she did. And let me just go back for a moment. I want to go back to what I said that led to you expressing this.
Mm-hmm.
In a quick sidebar, I didn't know that we both see in pictures sometimes. I didn't know that that was one of the things we had in common. So we'll come back to that. But I see scenes play out in my head. Um,
Yeah.
and that's how I make sense of my thoughts, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to sidebar that. So
Yeah.
yeah, so we were having a conversation, and I can't even remember how we even got to this place because we had this tendency to one thing leads to another and the conversation just continues to evolve. But what I shared was that it was about being embracing my bigness. And you asked me about, was it still about my bigness? And then I said where that came from. And that came from a place of me being, me hearing things that sometimes says, or indicates or prompts me to feel, or shall I say the way I receive it sometimes is that I'm being too much. And those
Mm-hmm.
are spaces when I'm actually just in my space. I'm being fully expressive, like my self-expression is on 10. And not necessarily in a way that's bad or whatever, but I'm just expressing where I stand on something or how, my point of view. And there are sometimes comments like, here she goes again, or she's on one, or whatever that may be that I'm passionate about. But it's a place that resonates with me and resonates on a really deep level. And I'm committed to my stance with that. And then there just may be other times where I'm being fully expressive where someone may be looking at things one way and I'm looking for, well, here's another perspective. Like trying to make the connection that the other person is having an experience too, and let's consider their point of view. All of these different things. People don't always they're not always up for looking for the wisdom in a situation or the good in something or trying to understand where somebody else's perspective is coming from. It's just
Mm-hmm.
about how it feels to them.
Mm-hmm.
In any way, so I was told once by a coach, one of my coaches, that sometimes I can be maybe so oceanic that someone who feels like a pond may not feel um may tend to feel inadequate in my space. And it caused me to pause and really reflect and like, am I causing someone else to feel inadequate? Like, do I need to edit who I am? Do I need to minimize my expression to accommodate someone else's comfort?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like, am I causing it, or is what they're actually experiencing really more about how they feel about themselves, not how I feel about them?
Mm-hmm.
And then you mentioned that the pendulum swings both ways.
Right.
And I'll let you take it from there. And then that's when you led into the other thing. So I just wanted to
Yeah.
catch the audience up on what led us to this place.
Yes. So, and in fact, that is the truth. The pendulum swings both ways. So if I'm out here in the world being unapologetically me, and the pendulum swings both ways, I could be knocking down everything that comes my way
Mm-hmm.
without the realization, awareness, and acknowledgement that I'm not the only one in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And understanding that I'm not the only one in the world and considering that there are others around me
Mm-hmm.
that I impact and that I am impacted by. And that can be positively or negatively. I don't know that
Mm-hmm.
that's relevant in this moment. Nevertheless, it's um, when I received that visual, it was very clear
Mm-hmm.
that we all coexist together, no matter where you are on the planet,
Mm-hmm.
no matter what we are coexisting in this moment together, but that I don't have to shrink and become smaller.
Mm-hmm.
My responsibility, my and I want to stress ability in this is understanding who I am and understanding on some level who those I interact with are. And if there's a point of uncertainty or that something is unclear, it's my responsibility to state that. It's and it really even goes a little bit deeper, I dare say this, Melanie, is that slowing ourselves down.
Mm-hmm.
Our physical selves, slowing our thoughts down for the purpose of slowing the conversation down. Because we step over, we misinterpret what's happening.
Mm-hmm.
We don't listen for what's in between the words. We don't pick up on the energy behind it. And so to slow things down a bit, to put ourselves in the equation as opposed to outside of the equation
Mm-hmm.
is what is important as far as I can see.
Mm-hmm.
Now, there may be another perspective in the world around that, but it is about slowing the conversation down. So when that comment came to you, it's, well, what does she mean by that? I mean, I could have assumed something and maybe been right and even right, but then felt it differently than what the intention was.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But that's slowing things down a bit to understand it. And we get these sound bites out here in the ethers and on social and
Mm-hmm.
different places like that. Oh, be unapologetically authentic or what have you. And it's like, people could take that to mean, being like a bull in a china shop where you're
Mm-hmm.
just going to take everything down that comes your way.
Mm-hmm.
And you look behind you and go, oh, well, I didn't do that,
Mm-hmm.
or that wasn't my intention.
Mm-hmm.
Well, did you ever really have an intention?
Mm-hmm.
That your actions now have created something that you didn't want.
And that's the key, like that you said so much in there, but like the intentionality behind it is very important. And as somebody who is hyper self-aware, sometimes almost to a fault, right? As someone who often goes into self-reflection and just to try to really take responsibility for my role, the role I play in the world, when I am showing up, when I'm not showing up, when I fall short, what is the wisdom in that? All of those different pieces. Of course, I received that one way, but then I took a moment to really like dive in and do some self-reflection. Like, what does this really mean for me? Is that
Mm,
really true? What part of it is true?
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
What part of it, how can I take this and make this work in a way that serves for the highest good of all parties involved? And all parties means including me, all of those different pieces. And so when you talk about slowing ourselves down and listening for what's in between the words, is is really clear, because sometimes we're often misunderstood, and it's sometimes received in a way that it wasn't intended,
mm-hmm.
right? So I could have possibly received that in a way that it wasn't intended, and I wasn't offended by it. It just struck me. It caused me to pause and go
Mm,
within and say, am
right.
I being too big? You know,
But then,
and
because I
right.
asked that, yeah.
And all of those different things, right? Um, can you go back for a minute too, because you mentioned having the responsibility and you wanted to stress ability. So will you speak to what you meant by that, so that that's another moment that doesn't get taken out of context and we can understand what your intention was for sharing that piece?
Yeah. So the being responsible, response able.
Mm-hmm.
Um, when we talk about leadership, and I talk about leadership often in the work that I do through the lens of starting with self,
Mm-hmm.
through our inner leader, and that we are all nobody here is innocent, so to speak. I
Mm-hmm.
know I get a lot of pushback on that, but
Mm-hmm.
the world is a big place, and it's yet we can all have an impact in
Mm-hmm.
our own ecosphere.
Mm-hmm.
And being response able is just that, being able to respond to what is showing up in the moment,
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to pulling back, as opposed to letting someone else take care of that.
Mm-hmm.
That each one of us has authority, and each one of us has power to access that authority. And to say it's someone else's responsibility, I'm choosing my words carefully.
You don't want to be too big, right? We'll take.
it you know it we is to not fully know who oneself is. And I'll just say it in the way my grandmother would say it. it's just lazy,
Mm.
you know.
So we just gonna put
To
this on your grandmother. Okay, I get that. Okay, I see how this is gonna work. No one,
I
no one.
say it to
So you
my
just said no one is innocent, right? And then you just place yourself in the innocent role, and we're gonna put it on grandma. let,
Ooh, Melanie,
yeah,
yeah,
I
yeah.
see. That's
I,
real, real clever. Real
remind me of
clever.
who I'm talking to. Hey, remind me who I'm talking to.
What
Because
did you?
nothing gets past you. Nothing gets past you. Not wanting to offend,
Hmm.
especially, when you put on your I'm a coach,
Hmm.
people automatic. I've had this experience where I can't have a human experience, that I always have to sort of walk on water.
Hmm.
Well, you're a coach and you should know, and you're a coach
Hmm.
and you're a coach, and that, so there is this additional responsibility, that as coaches that we have, and yet I'm still human.
And let's just pause right there. Let's hang out there for a moment. That is a thing that I am right now, as we're having this conversation, I'm willing to release that, because that is one of those things that has us being accommodating to the external expectations of
Mm-hmm.
who a coach is. And being a coach
Mm-hmm.
does not mean that we have it all together all the time, nor does it mean that we are not human. It's kind of
Mm-hmm.
like parenting. A lot of times, um, our offspring, right? Or even being the offspring of someone, right? I need to find another word because I don't really like offspring. Anyway, let me know if you have a replacement for that. But
Okay.
being someone's daughter, I'll just take it
Mm-hmm.
from that perspective. It is really important to remember that my parents were people before they were my parents,
Mm-hmm.
and that they
Exactly.
had human experiences. They had pain, they had disappointment, they had all these other things that came before I was ever even a thought.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Agree.
having an expectation of a parent to just have all the pieces figured out, and that they don't come with their own stuff that sometimes shows up in their parenting, is unreasonable. And I'll dare say, it lacks compassion for their human spirit. And so that to me is similar to that of a coach, or anybody. I don't care what your role is. If you're a lawyer, does that mean that there aren't times when you don't need legal counsel?
Mm-hmm.
If you're a
Exactly.
doctor, are you not allowed to not feel well sometimes?
Mm-hmm.
So what if we just like take this moment to even release the living up to the external expectations of what comes with our roles?
Yes. Yeah. I so agree with that. It has been such a gut punch when you hear that. Well, you're a
Yeah.
coach, and I'm like, okay, but yeah, I am. Does that, and this whole thing about imposter syndrome. Okay, so I am a coach, and I'm a wife,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm a sister, and I'm a daughter,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm human,
Mm-hmm.
and so, that whole grace, that thing about grace, and
Mm-hmm.
the expectation, and yet the other side of that I hear
Mm-hmm.
is there is a belief around, or a need around, the validity
Mm-hmm.
of a,
Mm-hmm.
that it is held in a high regard, because that's the other side that I hear.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you're a coach. It's saying, well, we hold the work that you do in such high regard,
Mm-hmm.
so I hear that as well.
Mm-hmm. And
and
there's
and that's in between.
and
Mm-hmm.
that can be dangerous in a sense, or harmful
Yeah.
in a way. And what I mean by that is because it also can place people on a certain pedestal, if you will.
Yeah.
Um, I'm going to just like remove coach out of it. And let's just say for a celebrity, I'll just take somebody who's a celebrity, and some coaches are celebrities. But we have this almost this romanticized perspective of who people are. People, many of whom we don't even know personally,
Mm-hmm.
but we've decided that we know who they are. And some of them have even become our friends in our head, all of these different things because we feel so aligned with what they stand for, what they do, or we admire what they do in some way, or they call us higher. Like it's something about them and their presence that calls us forth, right?
Yeah.
But when they have a shortcoming, then we want to cancel them.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Mm-hmm.
They don't get to walk on stage and break their heel, right? The stilettos have to always be on point. They don't get to have a moment where they cry from the stage. They don't get to have a moment where in their personal relationship, which is separate from whatever their vocation is, if something about that has challenges in it, then we suddenly see them differently. And
Yeah.
I would love for us to be able to offer grace in those spaces as well.
Absolutely. It's like we make so many judgments about ourselves and others and situations and circumstances. And I mean, and it comes and goes so quickly and easily. We hardly ever even pay attention to it.
Mm-hmm.
And I will say this, that, to your point, and other examples to that
Mm-hmm.
might be um, an artist or painter or someone like that who doesn't
Mm-hmm.
have a solitary piece of art on their wall.
Mm-hmm.
Does that discredit them from being an artist?
Mm-hmm.
A carpenter who can make wonderful woodwork, but lives in a trailer,
Mm-hmm.
for instance. Does that make him or her any less of a carpenter?
No.
We can have the skill and ability to do something. We may not always apply it to our own lives, but we have that skill and ability to do something, to be in service to others.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes, and more often than not, we don't use those skills in service to ourselves because the work is to serve others.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it might be a hairstylist can lay some hair out. We all know what that's like,
Right.
right?
Mm-hmm.
But you in the grocery store and you
Mm-hmm.
meet someone and say, "Hey, do you know a good hairstylist?" She said, "Well, as a matter of fact, I do. I am her." And you look at her and you go, "Oh,
Did you think to do
really?
your own?
Do you, do you do your own hair?" I mean, it's like,
Coming
but
from the
that's
beauty industry, I understand. I understand. I understand.
but that's not to say he or she
Yeah.
doesn't have the skill set and the ability. They
Mm-hmm.
do. We don't always use our skills to benefit, and that's why I have a coach, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
That's probably why a hairstylist has her own hairstylist. No, I don't do my hair. I do your hair and other people's hair.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
You know, because sometimes it's hard for us to to translate our skills and use them on ourselves
Mm-hmm.
because we're
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 too
too
close
close.
to it. Yeah.
We're too.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. Does that make them less of an artist? Does that make them less of a carpenter? Does that mean he's not a
Mm-hmm.
carpenter? Oh, I love the way you pull those things together.
Let's just get rid of that imposter syndrome thing
Yeah.
because it's a crock.
Mm-hmm. And so then when we think about that and going back to where we started with being unapologetically authentic, what does that really mean?
Mm. I think individually, it means something different for each and everybody. The context that I put it in is that the work that we do within our own four walls, within our homes, how does it translate out into the world?
Mm-hmm.
Because that's the true testing ground.
Mm-hmm.
So, with the current pandemic, it's really been challenging for me personally. Monday through Friday, sometimes 6 days a week, I'm here at home. And I don't mean to sound whiny and crying about it, but I am here at home alone for the most part, working,
Mm-hmm.
um, and trying to figure out each day, each moment of every day, you
Mm-hmm.
know.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but does that mean that I can have all these wonderful, insightful, reflective conversations in my own head? But when I go out to the grocery store, do I not take those insights with me?
Mm-hmm.
Because that's the real test of what I'm learning in this, under this microscope, if you will.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so being unapologetically authentic is uniquely different to each one of us. And yet, when you leave your four corners and you go out into the world, how are you showing up there?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, in that place of noticing when you're not showing up fully. Like when are
Right.
you editing? Or let me own it, when am I editing who I am? And
Mm-hmm.
what's prompting me to pull back? Is it because I don't feel safe in this space? Is it because I'm not feeling fully connected to who I am? Is it, what is that for me? Like each one of us, going back to you saying being response and able, right? Response able. Um, that place of owning our part.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I guess that's where I had the challenge with that other piece, where it's like, am I causing someone to feel this way? Or is that really a reflection? Like, is that really just illuminating what's going on internally for them? Which part do I hold, and which part do I champion them to hold for themselves and take ownership of?
That's
Because
right.
that's when it becomes a disservice, when I allow you to be the victim in your own story, and I enable that and nurture that aspect of it, and being able to
That's the word.
know how to find the harmony between the two.
That's it. That's the word. The victim.
Mm-hmm.
And when do we continue to perpetuate
Mm-hmm.
victim identity and misplace blame, if you will, which is a form of judgment and shaming and guilting? So yeah, when I hear that comment, and maybe it was just simply a statement and no more than that, but it I can see how it
Mm-hmm.
caused you to pause and do some introspection. And is that what I do, or is that more about someone
Mm-hmm.
else and less about me? And more often than not, it's
Mm-hmm.
about someone else, and calling each other to rise
Mm-hmm.
up. That no one is better than anyone else, that we all came in the same way, we'll all
Mm-hmm.
leave the same
Mm-hmm.
way, you know um, and that in between, we all have to do the
Mm-hmm.
same things,
Yeah.
one one breath
Mm-hmm.
at a time.
Hmm. Agreed. Agreed. One breath at a time. I just need to take a breath for that even now. Yeah. I really needed to just take a breath into that and breathe that in. Because here's what I will say, and this is something that I often, share with my clients too, is that I am responsible for my delivery.
Mm-hmm.
Being intentional about it, being clear about what it is, what is the message that I'd like to convey, having that at top of mind before I even open my mouth, right? And then if I do
Mm-hmm.
my part with doing that responsibly, at that point, I release the control of what happens on the other end. The way the receiver receives it is their part.
Yes.
Yeah,
That's
yeah. And
communication
being able to be
101.
detached from it, because that is also the part that stands in the way of us having difficult conversations, important conversations, because they're difficult and uncomfortable. But they are very necessary
Yes.
in order to move whatever movement it is forward. It's a necessary conversation. And so sometimes we can stay in our heads so much about, well, if I say this, then they're going to probably say, we've already made up how they're going to respond. And the truth is, we don't know how they're going to respond. We know how they've responded in the past, but we don't know how they will respond to this. And so it's like being clear about what is the message that I'd like to convey? What is my intention for this message? And what is the desired result or the desired experience that I would like to create? And I believe, and I'm open to hearing, anything you would like to add or tweak or, another perspective. But I believe if I do my absolute best that I have in that moment, whatever I have access to in that moment, and become very intentional and deliberate about the message that I want to convey, then after that, the rest is on, what happens next. And then I respond from there. But not get so caught up in my head or our heads, for those of you out there who totally get what I'm saying, where you don't have a conversation because you don't want to deal with what you are anticipating will be the response. Than to deliver it in a way that it can be heard. And I'll just say one more thing, and that is also that sometimes I find this to be true too, that sometimes people hear what they want to hear. They just extract the parts that they wanted to speak on anyway. So I'm going to just throw that out there. And then I'm going to zip my lips and let you take it from here.
Oh, that
Mm-hmm.
last part, yeah, that is true. People, selective hearing.
Yes.
What serves me right now? You know, and people pick. This is all I need. I don't hear anything. They
Mm-hmm.
can't take in anything else. They're not at a fertile place, a place of readiness to take in any more than what will serve them right there and right then
But
in
is
that
that
moment.
serving them though?
Is it?
Mm-hmm.
Exactly, is it?
Mm-hmm.
I can't answer that for anybody else. You know, it might very well be keeping them exactly where
Mm-hmm.
they don't want to be.
And so, okay, so I'll dare to say this. Maybe it is serving the the space they're in, because it's proven, like that whole self-fulfilling prophecy thing and all those mistaken beliefs. Like if we're trying to
Right.
prove something, then yes, that thing may prove that. So it's serving that need, that desire to prove something, that desire to defend something or protect something. So
Mm-hmm.
it may do that, but is it
Mm-hmm.
really in full service of your bigger calling, that bigger thing that you really are longing for? Is it really in service of that part in you that wants to be healed, that part of you that wants to be fully expressed, that part in you that wants to be accepted and loved and nurtured and appreciated?
Yeah. And that is the self-awareness piece. Um, it's hard.
Mhm.
Change is hard. And transformation is even
Mhm.
more difficult. And there is a
Mhm.
distinction between the two. And
You already put it out there, so let's just go ahead. What's
but
change and what's transformation? What's the
it,
distinction?
the distinction is, and I can
Okay.
tell it better by an example. And change is to change water
Mhm.
from a liquid to a solid. From you go from water as a liquid to an
Mhm.
ice cube. And then an ice cube can go back to liquid again. That's change. We can change it
Mhm.
from one form to another form. Transformation is what will not return to what
Mhm.
it was originally. And that's the ubiquitous
Mm.
butterfly example. It will never go back to being a caterpillar. It has now transformed.
Thank you. I love the way you explained that distinction. That was beautiful.
And
That was powerful. You know, like thinking
we,
about it, like that water
yeah, sometimes we,
example was, I would never have thought of water. So
mm,
thank you for that. And just going to let you know, I'm going to
mm.
so use that. So I hope I have your permission. But yeah, like thinking about the water, and we go from liquid to solid and then back to liquid as I watch the ice melt in this
Right.
water bottle now. Yes. And then that transformation being like, thank you for expressing what the distinction is. And the transformation being something that will not return back to its original form. Yeah. Yeah. And the butterfly
Hmm.
will not be a caterpillar ever again. Ever.
And we like to muck around in change.
I'm glad I don't curse, because somebody else would
We
have
do.
said something other than muck. But anyway, I'm just being silly.
One of my favorite words. um, but we do. We like to
Hmm.
muck around in change. Yeah. And it's a way, it's a way to deflect, create illusions from our truths. Is we muck, see, I've changed, you know, and then when no
Hmm.
one is looking, right, we fall back into
Hmm.
uh, old habits, and we wonder why things keep appearing in our
Hmm.
lives the way that they do, because we haven't, because
It does.
transformation requires a new
Hmm.
environment,
And a part of that
right?
transformation, like if we, like when we in that phase where we're playing around with change, or just for the fun of it, I'm gonna say muck around and change, is that fear of what we may lose and fear of what we may be leaving behind. Like us, that attachment to the old makes it difficult to step into the new.
Mm-hmm. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
transformation, relationships. You know, a butterfly
No,
is
it's
not
not.
hanging out with other caterpillars. It's hanging
Mm-hmm.
flies, right? You know, it means that we may have to relinquish some relationships. We may have
Mm-hmm.
to completely change our environment. We may completely have to shift from In fact, no, we do, because a caterpillar crawls on the ground.
Yeah.
A
Yeah.
butterfly flies. And it has the ability, it has two
Mm-hmm.
abilities. It can walk and it can fly. A caterpillar
Mm-hmm.
can only do
Mm-hmm.
one.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
I hear you. I hear you. I hear you. Yes.
you started to make me
Yes.
break out
Yes.
again.
Yes. Like this is good. This is good. I'm loving it. So, um, mm, the caterpillar can only do one. I never thought about that before. I'm gonna go ahead and just share that. Be open and honest about that. The caterpillar can only do one. And when we think about the relinquishing the relationships, that's the part that makes the transformation difficult. I believe that that's one of the main things that keeps us
It
stuck
does.
in the muck
Yes.
of the change, right?
Yeah.
Is that
Hmm.
because people like to remind you of what you used to be.
Oh, girl.
If you become wealthy, they like to remind you. Girl, I remember when I used to give you my
Nope.
leftovers, right? I remember when
Right.
we were bringing canned goods to you. They like to remind you of when you were not wealthy, right? Or when you are no longer doing certain things. Oh, I remember when couldn't wait until the weekend so that you could get high or whatever. Those people who haven't moved to the place that you're now in, like to remind you of who you used to be, and can spend a lot of time in that space reminding you, as
Hmm.
opposed to embracing and accepting who you are now, which is what makes it, for me, I'll just speak on my behalf, when it's not that you necessarily are no longer interested in them, but it makes it difficult to be with them
Yes.
because I
Yes.
no longer feel accepted or embraced in this space. Like, you're not embracing who I am now, who I've evolved into. And yeah,
Hmm.
and that feeling like you're trying to pull me
And that's,
back is unacceptable to me.
yes, there's a belonging piece there. And we all go where we
Mm-hmm.
feel as though we belong. And if in our transformation, what used to be in our relationships no
Yeah.
longer fits the transformation, we move on
Mm-hmm.
or we don't move on because we want to
Mm-hmm.
feel as though we belong. And it's easy to feel as though you belong
Mm-hmm.
to what is already familiar.
Mm-hmm.
That's really safe. And which really, all it
Yeah.
means is there's still more work to do. The
Mm-hmm.
transformation may not
Mm-hmm.
be complete yet,
Mm-hmm.
and there's still more work to do. And when the transformation is complete, then we move to where we belong, and
Mm-hmm.
we know what that feels like
Mm-hmm.
for us individually,
Mm-hmm.
you know. Um, and we become loved
Mm-hmm.
and respected
Mm-hmm.
as having transformed.
I just had a funny thought, a funny memory, right? So I remember when um, I remember when I first gave my life to God, right? And I was in a
Mm-hmm.
relationship with somebody who I had spent the night with the night before. And so when I came back after
Mm-hmm.
church and I came to pick up my things, like, for me, I thought it was a great thing to share what I had just experienced. But their
Uh-oh.
response wasn't necessarily, again, I don't have any control over how someone's respond. their response wasn't what I really would have liked. So I didn't stay as long. I just grabbed my things to leave. And I remember leaving out the door and them standing in the doorway yelling, I wonder how God feels about that Cavassier you had last night.
Oh my God.
I had totally forgotten about that until this moment. And it was like, again, reminding you of who I was before. I wonder how God feels about that Cavassier you had last night. And all of these other things.
Mhm.
And I'm going to go ahead and I know exactly what led me to walking out the door. I'm going to just share this again. Share this part. It was their immediate response was, does that mean we won't have sex anymore? And I was like, that's what you got out of that? Like, you just totally made this all about what you're going to get and how things are going to change for you. And I get that is like a conversation that needs to happen, like with the people that we're in relationship. What's going to change for them? How is their experience going to be changed? And how are we considering
Yeah.
them in this, with the choices that we make as we evolve, right? So that's like,
So
what he
important.
was really saying is like, well, what about me and how do I fit into this? What's going to change with us?
Mm-hmm.
And so that was the underlying thing. But,
Yeah.
right, it is.
Which is
That was the
important,
underlying
Melanie. Let's
thing.
not,
And so I was
yeah.
having my experience and he was having his, and we were having two very different experiences at the time, and we didn't make space to slow it down, like what you talked about earlier, and really pay attention to what was happening with the words in between, you know?
And there's another thing to add into the transformation
Mm-hmm.
piece, and it's maturity, which
Mm-hmm.
speaks to readiness. I would dare that muddy, murky place where a caterpillar finds itself at the precipice
Mm-hmm.
of transforming. They haven't left the form of caterpillar, but they are
Mm-hmm.
right there at the edge. And they're moving through this murky, muddy space of
Mm-hmm.
what is to come before they're actually in that phase of metamorphosis. There are
Mm-hmm.
probably multiple stages, right? And so when we as humans are in our change and transformation process, it's a matter of maturity because we can
Mm-hmm.
circumvent that growth. It can be snipped in a moment
Mm-hmm.
because of fear, because slowing down the conversation didn't happen, because we didn't read in between the words or hear the underlying
Mm-hmm.
symptom here. And so that speaks to maturity. When are
Mm-hmm.
we ready for something? We may be calling something in, and the reason it eludes us
Mm-hmm.
is because we're not ready. There's a lot of prep work that has to happen.
That's good.
I'm not just going to go into the kitchen and bake a cake.
Mm-hmm.
Do I have the ingredients? Do I understand how my oven works? The box says put it on, 350, 375, 400. I may have to put it on, 335. I mean, it's a
Mm-hmm.
whole lot of
Mm-hmm.
understanding, you know, that
So wait
get
a minute.
lost in the
Right, like just
translation.
now, when you were baking a cake, I just knew you were baking it from scratch, and then you mentioned the box.
See, there you
Perfect
go.
example. Yes. I'm
Right?
like, oh,
There you
Esther's about
go.
to bake a cake from scratch. I even made up that maybe one of your grandmothers taught you how to make this cake and you were going to use her whole recipe. All of that went through my mind when you first mentioned going in the kitchen to bake a cake and knowing how your oven works. And then you mentioned the box. And I'm like, she got a box of Dunkin' Hines.
I went back to the easy bake
I
oven,
had an
Melanie.
easy
Do
bake
you
oven.
remember?
Yes, I remember.
Both my G ma and my Big Mama taught me
Okay.
how to bake and how to cook now.
Mhm.
It's a little challenging these days, but I dare not buy a box off the shelf.
Okay.
But I went
Okay.
back to the easy
Okay.
bake oven
That's better.
days.
Yeah, okay.
There's so much in what we just said in the last 10 minutes.
I'm sorry, that's
I'm
me and
like,
my
I can't even
silliness
remember
because
what.
I like to play
But I want
sometimes
to go
too,
back.
right? So yeah, so you were going in the kitchen. Like one of the things you were talking about is that like they're basically stages, right? And that it's a matter of your readiness, which speaks to your maturity.
Mhm. Mhm.
Mm-hmm.
And let's give
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
processes due respect. You know, we think in terms of instant. Again, the box of cake, instant potatoes. The rice-a-roni. It. I'm using these food
Are you
metaphors.
hungry, Esther? Did I? Are we having this conversation with dinner in mind?
Probably.
Are you
But
related to Jill Scott?
just give.
Put it on collard green. Can I get it with my? Yes. Okay. I'm sorry. Listen,
We
this
just
is
went
she
down a
chose
whole other
joy.
rabbit hole. And what would it be
every
without a little
every
laughter,
now and
right?
then.
It's like it doesn't have to be so serious. Uh, but it is
Okay, I'm gonna
I
be
forgot what
quiet.
I
I'm
was
gonna
gonna
stop
say.
interrupting you.
What
Your
with
food
you?
metaphors and giving like really what you
uh
said was
instant.
well what you were starting with, which is very important, is you said let's give process is due respect. And that is important.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not going to interrupt you this time, I don't think. And I want you to finish that thought because that is huge.
Yeah. Um we find fault with.
Mm-hmm.
I've experienced it myself. I've pushed it out there as well as received it. Finding fault with people that aren't
Mm-hmm.
ready to go with me on my journey. Um, Being upset because I may have missed an opportunity to go
Mm-hmm.
with someone on their journey. And so friendships severed or just
Mm-hmm.
simply evaporated. Um, I really am one that champions for someone's internal listening. And so my process for doing may look differently than someone else's process for doing. And we look for quick fixes in the moment.
Mm-hmm.
Again, to slow down is to speed up. And giving respect to due process, allowing things to unfold as they would naturally, listening to our internal selves, our internal wisdom, our internal oracle can help us move toward transformation at a much faster pace, although moving faster is not the goal. Transformation is the goal. But let us not forget the journey. And the process is the journey. I just think there will be a great deal more harmony in the world, in our spirits, in our souls, by slowing down. It's so interesting. What comes up for me right now in this moment, when I was a young girl, I moved at the pace of my mother and my grandmother, and they were quick paced. Growing up in Ohio, Cleveland, Ohio, riding the rapid transit and things of that nature. You had, when you caught the bus, you didn't want to miss the bus,
I can
especially in the dead of
imagine.
winter. Mm, right, you didn't want to be out there in the cold waiting on the rapid, waiting on the bus, and so you had to move at a quick pace. Get there to the bus stop on time, if not early, because sometimes even you wanted to have a place to sit down, and if it was a a, a frequent bus line, you know, um, you could be out of a seat, you know. And that even went to getting on the bus, getting off from work, getting on the bus. The bus is crowded and everybody's standing in the aisle and holding on. But nevertheless, I realized just a few years ago, the pace at which I was physically moving was not my pace. The pace at which I was physically moving was not my pace. And how I came to realize it was the tiredness, the fatigue, the pain that I felt in my body. All of a sudden, it was like that came online. That came into my awareness, my consciousness. I'm not moving at my pace. I'm moving at somebody else's pace. The rat race, the Monday through Friday, 8 to
That's another
5. Don't get me
podcast
started on that
episode.
one.
Mm-hmm.
The 40-hour work,
Mm-hmm.
the 40-hour work week,
Mm-hmm.
that is not my pace. To get
Mm-hmm.
quality out of me, I have a process. I have a way of doing. I have a way of observing. I have a way of thinking and analyzing. That is my way. And to relinquish that for something and someone else, you're not getting quality out of me. And so all that to say is that each one of us has a process, and that part of that maturity, part of that transformation, these things happen in phases and they happen in stages. It's not all at once. It's not instant. It's not, I dream a genie in a bottle,
So true.
It's not that. It's it's work, and it's reflection, introspection, and it's acknowledging who you are, and then accepting that.
That
That
acceptance piece
acceptance
is
piece is big.
huge. Not only the acceptance of it for ourselves, right? But even the acceptance of it for others. And that's sometimes where it's challenging. Because going back to the very thing you're speaking of is about like giving respect to due process, and that accepting that everyone's not in the same phase or stage or level of readiness and maturity as the other, and being able to accept that, meet them where they are, and also accept where we are, is where the disconnect often
Exactly.
happens. And I've fallen there too, where I've been, even though I know that intellectually, I don't always live in that space. I'm not always like embodying that, depending on who that person is to me in my life, there are some that there's a part of me that want to push and pull them a little harder, and it's not fair to them. Nor is it fair to me to even hold that space, like be attached to it in that way. And so that's
You
a
wouldn't
word.
make a baby eat solid food.
No, I'm just kidding. No, I'm just kidding. No, I wouldn't. Yeah.
Not with you right now.
It's like, this is what I'm eating. This is what you're going to eat. They asked me to babysit. This is what comes with it.
You know, you have that's exactly what I mean, though, is meeting someone where they are, but you're not going to eat baby food. The baby's going to eat the baby food. You're going to provide them with that, and you're going to eat solid food. That's what that's what this is. I'm going to meet you where you are. But I don't have to be there. We make things such an either or,
and you know,
as
I love the
opposed
word
to
and.
both and.
Yeah, you know, I love the word and. Yeah, and it's that
I
thing,
know.
like it happens with it happens with. I'm gonna say this, and then I'm gonna go ahead and let you close out. For example, it's kind of like that. We had the people that have their come to Jesus moment, and then they want to go out and make everybody saved, right? Even though mom and them been trying to get you over there for the past 20 years, now that you got there, you think everybody in your circle needs to be where you are, right? And it turns people off, right? Or even here, or even when we step into entrepreneurship, like I don't align with those who are putting messages out there in the ethers that tries to make people feel bad because they have an employer. It's like, we're not making it. I don't believe that there's a right or wrong to it. It's like, what's true for you? What's a fit for you? Entrepreneurship may be my path, but it doesn't mean that I have to make it your path or make you wrong because your career path calls for a different structure, right? Or even the natural hair, for all of my Black listeners out there, the natural hair versus the relaxed hair. Now that we've gone natural, we don't need to make another sister feel wrong or shamed because she's still getting relaxer. Like, it's not either. It's like leaving room for that. And so all of those things come into play in many different ways.
And I would encourage, as I do myself, I'm listening for that critic in my head that is judging others and circumstances and situations, and pay attention to that, because that voice is really not representative of who we are. It was picked up as a way to survive, and if you really think about that, you'll understand why that is. But we no longer need that, and that's why we get hijacked so easily by our negative emotions. Not that they're not valid, but we need to know when they are valid, when we really are facing danger. So paying attention to that critic and that judge, in our heads, and noticing it and choosing something different.
Absolutely.
That's the beginning of transforming.
That is a word right there. And again, that's another episode. So I'm really working hard to not comment. Better respond to it, because that could be another hour. Because that's the space we both even teach on, or work with clients through. And so it's something we're very passionate about, is that voice in our head and being able to choose something different. And that awareness. And again, that not making it wrong and not judging her, all of those things. So I'm going to ask you, is there anything else you'd like to say for the sake of time, right? Anything else you'd like to say as it relates to giving process is due respect? Any final words on that?
I will just say to the listeners listening to this podcast, there are a lot of nuggets here. So listen intentionally and go back and listen again and allow the commentary here to resonate with you in whatever way it resonates with you. And then move with that. That's your process.
It does.
I hope that makes clear sense.
So Esther, thank you so much for spending this time with us. You shared I really appreciate you sharing your wisdom here. I'm excited about the wisdom you shared at the Exhale Now retreat, which was amazing. And so I'm just filled with gratitude, like far beyond what I could actually put into words, for your presence in your life and what you mean to me. And so thank you for agreeing to let me share you with my tribe, my community. And so as I speak of gratitude, I always ask my guests, like, what are you grateful for in this moment? Because I believe that joy, we on this She Chose Joy podcast, that joy and gratitude, they're partners. They play well together. And so what is it that you, Esther Bailey-Bass, is grateful for in this moment?
In this moment, Melanie, I'm grateful for you and the friendship that we formed, again, which is a whole other podcast. But I am grateful to you for this opportunity that you've extended to me to expand my voice and to share my voice and my perspective with the world.
And so I appreciate you for that. And how may listeners stay connected with you? To you. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You can learn more about me, my website, EstherBailey-Bass.com. You can learn more about me there. You can follow me on social at Ebb and Flow Coach. That's EBB, the letter N, FLOW Coach.
Awesome.
Follow me on social
there. Esther and I have this thing. So her company is Ebb and Flow. And I was a little slow on catching it that EBB were her initials. And so now we have this new thing that when she does or says something that that is really powerful to me or what have you, I didn't do it during our conversation here because I already had been playing enough, but I'll say, oh, I've just been ebbed. Oh, and they've just been ebbed. And I said all that to say, so all my listeners, thank you for tuning in, but you too have just been ebbed because she dropped some nuggets, didn't she? There's no way. Yeah, so you've just been ebbed. So thank you for showing up in all your ebbness. And I often say that our freedom lies in our decision to say yes to who we are, yes to who we are, yes to what we stand for. And so I'm asking you, the listeners, will you stand for giving your due process some respect? And in that note, I'll leave you there and let you sit with that. And I'll see you on the next episode. Thank you for joining us on She Chose Joy.